Hello, and welcome to Sparks of Love.
Part 2. This is a continuation of the story. The link to the first part is in the description of this video. Enjoy watching. The next few days were hard on everyone. Things were a whirlwind of activity. Bonnie went home to her parents' house. The next day, I took the girls over to visit her, but I didn't go in. They couldn't stay for very long because Bonnie had to go to the hospital to be with Brandy. The doctors wouldn't let Brandy come home for a couple more days. Bonnie called me constantly, begging me to speak to her. She sent her parents, either singly or together, to talk to me. Strangely, it was the unemotional Brenda who was the closest to understanding. One night, when the girls were asleep, and Bonnie claimed she couldn't handle being away from me any longer, she conned Brenda into bringing her by the house. She knocked on the door loudly and tried to make me let her in. I called her on my cell phone and told her that the girls were asleep and she'd wake them up by acting like a fool. That wouldn't do her chances of getting custody any good. She told me that if I would just come out and talk to her for 2 minutes, she'd go away. She just needed to hear the sound of my voice. I agreed. I stepped out on the porch and saw Bonnie and her sister Brenda sitting in the lounge chairs. There were 4 chairs there that we sat in sometimes with the kids. I guess she expected me to sit in one of the chairs. She was probably expecting me to sit in the one next to her. I sat on the porch railing opposite the chairs. "Hey, Brenda," I said, smiling. Then I turned to my wife. I very slowly let my smile fade and my face change until it showed the anger and the revulsion I felt towards her. I wanted her to see all of the changes in my expression. Then, speaking in the coldest voice I could muster, I said, "You have 2 minutes." "How are the girls?" she asked. "They're fine," I told her, describing what we'd done that day. She smiled. "I always knew you'd be a great father. I guess that's why it's so hard for me to believe that you haven't been to the hospital to visit your other daughter, who isn't doing nearly as well. She needs you too, and her mother needs you more than ever." "Holy," I said. "Time sure flies when you're listening to your clock. Your time is up. If you start banging on my door again, I'll call the police." She reached out to grab me. "Grant, I love you. I'm begging you to forgive me and give me one more chance. Give Brandy a chance." As I started to close the door, I heard Brenda tell her, "Leave him alone, Bonnie. Haven't you done enough to him already? He's hurting too, and none of this was his fault. You did this." Bonnie snapped right back at her sister, "Shut the hell up, Brenda. He's mine, and he always will be. You're supposed to be on my side. I already know I messed up. Now I need to fix it, and I'm trying to. Maybe you don't understand this because you've never loved anyone, but I'm not going to let him divorce me. It is not going to happen." I could hear the desperation in her voice. The next morning, I woke up and made breakfast for my daughters before dropping them off at school. That was a normal thing I did every day. Anyway, me making breakfast wasn't normal, but dropping them off at school was. They were very excited. "Brandy comes home today, Daddy," said Marie. "That's great, Angel," I said quietly, trying to keep the rage out of my voice so my daughter wouldn't think it was directed at her. "Remember the rules," I said to Tara as we got close to their school. "What rules, baby?" I asked. "Marie is too old to be your baby. She's just a girl now. I'm your baby, and Brandy is Mom's baby," said Tara. "Okay, that has been established," I laughed as I let them out. I watched them walk into the school and drove off towards my job, thinking that everything was fine. I sat down at my desk and started trying to concentrate on the assignments that needed to go out that day. I'd been working and getting absolutely nothing done for about 3 hours when my secretary, Joan, came in and told me that I had 2 urgent calls, one from the police and the other from the hospital. I took the call from the police. My house had been broken into. I quickly ran outside, jumped into my Camaro, and drove home. My alarm wasn't on, which was strange because I was sure I'd set it that morning. There were 2 police officers there. They showed me where a window had been broken on the side of the house. "That's how they got in," said one of the officers. I opened the front door and looked around the house. It hadn't been ransacked. In fact, nothing was missing or damaged. I tried to look at things with a more critical eye. Then I noticed it. The dishes from the girls' breakfast were gone, and the dishwasher was running. The dirty clothes hamper was empty, and there was a load of laundry in the washer and another in the dryer. When I told the officers that, they laughed. "Someone broke into your house to do your housework for you," they laughed. As we continued through the house, I noticed a few things missing. A framed picture of Bonnie and me at our wedding was gone. It was a special picture because, out of all the pictures taken at our wedding, this one was the only one that didn't have Marie in it. Our entire wedding album was still there. In fact, it had been placed on my bed. There was a piece of paper on top of it. Several family pictures, as well as pictures of the girls, were missing, and a few of Bonnie's outfits and personal items were gone. It was very clear what had happened. I'd changed the locks on the house so Bonnie couldn't get in. She'd broken the window and turned off the alarm. I explained it to the officers, and they left after finding out that I didn't want to press charges. I didn't blame them. I was sure there were donuts out there that needed them. I did wonder why Bonnie had taken the wedding album. It was one of her favorite things. She often leafed through it, looking at each picture, each perfect moment in time captured and held there, unchanging as we went through our lives. She must have memorized all of those pictures by now, but she still loved to look at that book. I picked up her note. "Dearest Grant, I'm sorry that I didn't love you at first sight the way that you've always sworn you did me. Be that as it may, you've always been far more important to me than I ever could be to you. You were free when we met to go out and find anyone you wanted. That was one of the ways I knew that you truly loved me. I mean, realistically, who goes out and falls for a chunky girl with a kid when there are tons of slim, attractive girls with no dependents available? It had to be love. I wasn't free, though, to simply find someone that I loved. After our first date, I was sure that I loved you too, but I wasn't free to give my heart to someone just because I loved them. I had to think of my daughter as well. It had to be a good fit for all of us, and it was. After that, my love for you blossomed and continued to grow until it bordered on obsession. It still does. I would do anything to keep you in my life. I don't have to worry about my heart because you will always be there. No one could ever take your place or compare to you in my bed either, and believe me, I'd know. I had my time as a wild girl, you know about this already, and no one ever made me feel the way you did. When you talked about me and my lover laughing at you, you were partially right. He didn't laugh at you because he never knew anything about you. I wouldn't dirty my love for you by even mentioning to him that I was married. I let him think that I was just some sluttish fat girl who needed intimate. The person laughing at you was me, Grant. I laughed that you would even think that anyone could ever replace you. It's still funny. There will never be another man for me. Surprisingly, he didn't even remember me from before. That only goes to show how shallow an a-hole he is. But it's also why I needed him. He only had one good thing going for him. He didn't have a big tool. Yours is so much better, but he's quick and really potent. I knew he could get me pregnant quickly. I also knew that he has no soul and would never wonder about his child. After all, he left after getting me pregnant the first time and never tried to contact me about Marie. She's never been his daughter. She's always been yours. I love you, Grant. I really thought that this would be a good thing. I didn't enjoy the intimate. I didn't kiss him. I didn't even move. I just lay there and let him have intimate with me. It was even worse the second time because I knew how it would be, and the first time was so bad. Both times, I came home and took at least 5 showers. I just couldn't get clean enough. I felt really bad after both times too. The only thing that cheered me up was making love to you and blocking out the painful memories, but not the guilt. I was really glad when I found out I was pregnant because it meant that I wouldn't have to see him again. He complained both times about me being a dead intimate partner and probably wouldn't have done it again. I did this not because I enjoyed it, but because I wanted to share something wonderful with the only man I have ever loved, something we didn't seem to be able to do without help. If I had known that it would endanger our family, I never would have done it. I did it for our family, not to tear it apart. It seemed like something so small to give her something so wonderful. I had to endure a little bit of unpleasantness. You were never supposed to know. My body and all of me have belonged only to you, Grant, since we met. I didn't think that letting someone borrow one tiny piece of it would cause you not to want the whole thing anymore, especially if we got something that we wanted very badly. Grant, you love Marie with all of your heart and soul. If the only way for us to have her would be for me to have intimate with someone else, would you want me to do it? Would you say no, knowing how much you've grown to love her? I don't think you'd like it, but you'd do anything for your daughter. You've said it so many times. It's the same thing with Brandy, the same man, the same situation. Whether you want to believe this or not, Brandy is your daughter. I still maintain that you've taken care of her for all of her brief life so far. As for who made her, I had intimate with both of you. You made love to me the day she was conceived too. Both times, you and I had intimate in the morning before I left to go to him, and again after I'd been with him. I really believe that you got me in the mood and prepared my body to receive his male hormones. You are at least partially responsible for our child's conception. The other thing is the legality of the situation. Grant, I know you're hurt, but you are legally responsible for our daughter. I think, in your mind, you forget that the evening she was born, after you helped deliver her and cut her umbilical cord yourself, you must have been so happy that you forgot something. While you were jumping around, shaking people's hands, and telling them that your name was Daddy, you signed her birth certificate. In the eyes of the law, as well as mine, you are her father. I'm not trying to trap you into anything, Grant. I'm trying to show you who you are. I told you before that you would love her as much as you do your other daughters, and I'm willing to risk my happiness and a part of my life to prove it to you. Always remember, Grant, that I love you more than anything else in this world. Not being with you will hurt me badly, but just like you, I'd sacrifice anything for my babies. I only hope that the old saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder, works for us as well. Yours forever, Bonnie. I had no idea what the hell she was talking about. In a couple of months, we'd be divorced, and I might have custody of my 2 daughters, or she might. It would be up to the courts to decide. At least that was what I thought. My heart missed Bonnie, but my pride wouldn't allow forgiveness. Reading her letter did not soften my stance toward her, and I still wasn't ready to forgive her. On the other hand, I was ready to find this Denny creep and break his bones for running out on Marie. All of that was forgotten when the phone began ringing. It was the hospital again. It was probably Bonnie calling me from the hospital, wondering whether or not I'd read her letter. What? I said into the phone. Grant, you have to come over here now, said Bonnie's mother, Mary. Jim has had a heart attack, and there's a problem with Brandy. Brandy is not my problem, I thought. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I got to the hospital, 2 nurses grabbed me and tried to pull me in opposite directions. One, a big black woman, was trying to pull me toward pediatrics. She had an evil look on her face and was scary as hell. I thought for a while that I was going to have to deck that witch. The other nurse was from the cardiac unit and was equally stout, but she had a kinder expression on her face. She eventually won after they had a conversation about which need was more pressing. I hate deadbeat dads, said the black woman as she let me go. I promise I'll come and pay whatever I owe you or sign the papers so my health care can take care of it until the divorce goes through. I know that this is my problem. She looked at me with an expression that said she had no idea what the hell I was babbling about and left. I went into the cardiac ward and saw Jim. Actually, his heart attack had been mild. Mary was by his side. He's going to be laid up for a while, she said. I'm sorry, I won't be much help to you, but my husband has to take first priority. Don't worry about it, Mary, I said. If there's anything I can do to help you out, let me know. I can handle my girls easily. I've done it before, and while Bonnie was pregnant, I kind of got used to doing most of it anyway. I just need to work out a schedule. Besides, if there's a problem, I can always call Bonnie if I have to. Mary looked at me and said, No one told you? No one told me what? I asked. Then a doctor came and got Mary and took her away to talk about Jim's care. I figured I'd go out and find Bonnie to talk to her. Maybe she could tell me what was going on, but I had no intention of dealing with her issues or hers. When I got outside, the big mean nurse grabbed my hand and led me to pediatrics. "We've been calling you all day," she snapped. "I know that your wife disappearing is hard on your family, but you still have responsibilities." I had no idea what she was talking about. She gave me a couple of papers to sign and forced me into a wheelchair. Then she put the baby into my arms and pushed me toward the door. "You're lucky we're so busy today," she snapped. "When you didn't show up to pick her up this morning like you were supposed to, we were supposed to call the Family Services Agency and have you arrested. What kind of an a-hole abandons a newborn?" I sat there in the wheelchair with the most surprised look possible on my face. If Brenda hadn't come walking by, I might still be sitting there. "Mom told me to help you out," said Brenda. "Dad is going to be here for a couple of days, but then he'll go home. He's going to have a few restrictions in terms of diet and exercise, but he'll be fine. She's more worried about you." Brenda looked at me sitting there in the wheelchair and smiled. She called to one of her mom's friends, who was waiting to see Jim. She asked him to drive her car to my house, and she'd bring him right back. For some reason that I still can't figure out, he didn't grumble at all. I guess the thought of being in a car in close quarters with a woman as attractive as Brenda was its own reward. "Here, Brenda, why don't you take this?" I said, indicating the baby. "Oh no," she claimed. "I have no maternal instincts. I'd probably break it. You're the one who's supposed to be super dad. You can handle it. Besides, there's something really weird going on here." We went out to my Camaro, and I gingerly got in. I'd have to look around the house for the new car seat that we bought for the baby. As we pulled out of the parking lot and stopped at a red light, Brenda looked over at me. "That is the weirdest," she said. "What?" I asked. "She's quiet and calm," said Brenda. "I visited her every day since she was born. I've never seen this baby quiet. Are you sure they gave you the right one?" "Don't start," I said. "I'm only keeping this thing until your sister gets back from screwing whomever she went off with. In the meantime, I intend to go ahead with my divorce plans, and maybe I can get her charged with abandonment for running off and leaving this thing." "Huh," she said. "I'm serious, Brenda. This is," I spat. "Huh," she said. "Huh?" "My ass," I said. "I'm unloading this thing as soon as I can. I'll give her 2 days to get her butt back here, then I'm taking this thing to social services and explaining the situation to them. They can find her a home or foster parents or something like that." "Okay," said Brenda as we pulled up in front of my house. "Do you need anything?" she asked. "No," I spat. "We bought formula the day she was born and haven't opened it yet. Your sister is super mom. We have everything we need." "Grant, you're a great guy," she said. "What Bonnie did was flat out wrong. I don't agree at all with what she did, but I do know that she's tearing herself up over losing you. I think, in some ways, as much as she loves being a mom, she'd started to resent this baby. That's why she left. She has to get her head straight. It wasn't good for the baby to have her mom blaming her in part for wrecking your family. Please don't take it out on her. Also, she's only a baby. Can you just wait and settle your issues with Bonnie when she gets back?" I looked at her and realized that she was right. I nodded my head. "Grant," Brenda said, grabbing my face. It was the first time I remember her reaching out to touch anyone. "What I said before about you being the only person she was quiet for, I meant it. She wasn't even this peaceful when Bonnie held her. Maybe she's already sensed that her mommy wasn't feeling good about having her. You're the best man I know, Grant. Let my niece feel that. You don't have to accept her as your child, but she is related to you. Marie is still yours, isn't she?" I nodded my head. "Of course she is," I spat. "Well, just accept Brandy as Marie and Tara's half-sister, if not as your daughter. Think of her as their cousin or something. Maybe she isn't yours, but she's part of your family." I nodded grudgingly. I love her so much, Brenda, I said sadly. Grant, she still loves you. She hasn't given up on you at all, and she's not going off with anyone either. There's no one except for you, she said. She was getting ready to say something else, but we were interrupted. The girls came running out of the house excitedly. They were so busy cooing and looking at the baby that they didn't notice that their mother wasn't there. I sensed challenging times ahead. Meanwhile, Brenda was at the convent. I walked down the once familiar halls with a very somber expression on my face. The expression was not out of respect for the place I found myself in. My heart was breaking. I felt like I was being torn in two. I missed Grant so much that I wanted to die. That had been one of my options, and it was still on the table if this plan didn't work. I still might. Once upon a time, I'd expected to live out my life within these walls. I think I wanted to be a teacher then, but that was over 10 years ago, so I may be wrong. Bonnie, how good it is to see you again, said Reverend Mother Agnes. She was Sister Agnes when I was here, and she was old then. She's positively ancient now. As I looked at her face, I could still see some of the smiling face of the woman from back then, but she was far more serious now. She also had a strength that wasn't based on physicality. Her body may be failing her, but her emotional and spiritual strength must have at least doubled. It's good to see you again too, Mother Agnes, I said. Bonnie, you're coming here as a lay worker to help us. There's no need to stand on formality. You aren't a part of the order anymore, but we're still friends. You can just call me Agnes. We spent a few more minutes going over what I'd be doing for the order for the next few months. My stay here was open-ended. I'd signed on to help install a computer system in the convent. It could literally take years to drag them kicking and screaming out of the dark ages. I hoped that it wouldn't take that long for me to be able to go home. Every minute that I spent away from my family was torture, but it would be worth anything to keep us together. The solutions that Grant had come up with for my betrayal were all unacceptable. After he found out what I'd done, I started thinking about solutions myself, and none of them were any good. I'd even come up with the idea of giving Brandy up for adoption. Strangely, that wasn't one of Grant's ideas, and I knew why. He and I both strongly believe that a child needs their parents. Even one parent is better than none. Since he didn't want to be her father, he never envisioned the possibility that I'd give her up. Grant was being silly, though, because I love all of my daughters. But as much as I love Brandy, if I had to choose between her and my husband, she'd lose. I wouldn't abandon her. I'd make sure she was placed with a good family, perhaps even with a family that was related to us. But there was simply no way I could take my other girl's father away from them, and then there were my own selfish needs for Grant as well. Alone in my room, I pulled out my iPad. There was no Wi-Fi network in the convent yet, so I had to use it over the 3G network. I lightly touched an app, and my screen filled with a grid of square windows. There were 6 squares in the grid. I tapped one, and it filled my screen. I started crying silently as I looked at it. I turned up the volume as I watched Grant sitting in the rocking chair by our fireplace. He was holding Brandy and rocking her to sleep. It was no surprise to me that she was quiet for Grant. He has such a way with kids. I watched as Marie came in and sat down next to him. That girl followed her dad around like a puppy. There was no way I could have separated them. I really have the feeling that if it came down to a choice, my daughter at 14 would have chosen to stay with her dad in a divorce. Grant handed the baby to her older sister so we could get out of the rocking chair. She handed her back when he was standing up and followed him to her bedroom. Grant had moved her bassinet into our room. The sight of it made me start crying. He put her down to sleep and stayed there with Marie by his side until she drifted off. Then he went into the girls' room and read Tara a bedtime story. Marie was staring down at something in her hands the whole time. I couldn't see what it was. I couldn't believe it. Grant had bought Marie a cell phone. He knew I didn't want our kids to become phone junkies. She was only 14. I calmed myself down and smiled. I was sure he was just giving them a few things to distract them from feeling bad about me not being there. Tara is still afraid of the dark, but with Marie in the room, it's not a problem. Grant had put a night light by her bed. Tara seemed to have a few new toys, too. I hoped he'd get over his anger at me before the girls took over the house completely. Over the next few months, I ordered and installed computers in the convent. I held classes and taught the nuns basic computer skills, as well as how to use various types of computer software. I had the convent connected to the internet and installed a small business network. I threw myself into my work, and at the end of each day, I returned to my room and engaged in my favorite pastime, watching my family. As I'd known he would, Grant had cared for our daughters even better than I'd expected. Against everything he'd said, a bond had formed between Grant and our youngest daughter. Tears had rolled down my cheeks as I watched him walk through the living room, rocking the infant in his arms. As she went through the pain of teething, he gave her ice chips, just as he had with Tara. The thing that hurt me the most was when he began talking to the baby as he walked with her. Each night, he told her all about her sisters when they were younger and how she would grow up to be smart and beautiful just like them. Then he started talking about his relationship and courtship with me. I couldn't tell if he was sharing these things with the baby because he really expected her to understand them or if he was only talking to work out his own demons. He talked about exactly how much he loved me and how much I'd meant to him. I'd been everything to him. Hearing him say it in the past tense hurt me, and hearing about the way he truly felt about what I'd done hurt me even more. After that night, I hadn't watched him for a few days and couldn't work because I was too depressed and hurt. I began to see how badly what I had done hurt him. I began to wonder, not for the first time, if what I'd done had been truly worth what I was going through now. I also began to doubt whether my plan would succeed. I was no longer sure that my husband would ever want me back. My sister routinely visited my family and seemed to be becoming closer to Grant. That was something I hadn't planned on. In fact, none of this was going according to my plan. I'd expected this to take no longer than 2 or 3 months. It was nearing a year. There had been a few things that I considered triumphs over the past 11 months. One had been when my father recovered from his heart attack. My mother had offered to take Brandy, but Grant had refused. He told her that she had enough problems with Dad's health and that he'd hold on until I returned. I was sure that his feelings for our daughter were growing. Another triumph was getting him the DVDs. Denny had a habit of recording some of his trysts. I had taken the DVDs from him. I hadn't wanted anyone to ever find out what I'd done. One night, I heard Grant telling Brenda that he was sure I had been cheating on him for weeks, probably years, and that I'd probably been back in hooker mode. It hurt me that he thought I could do that to him. Brenda was the only one who knew where I was. I called my sister and told her to leave the DVDs somewhere that Grant might find them. Brenda asked Grant if she could look through my clothes for something to wear while she helped him with the housework. As she and Grant looked through a drawer trying to find her a sweatshirt, Grant discovered the DVDs. I knew it was risky allowing Grant to see another man having intimate with me. If he took it the wrong way, I might never get him back. But I also knew that if he didn't get over his idea that I'd been with Denny for pleasure, I might still not get him back. I'd watched the video through my hidden cameras along with Grant, watching his reaction. The conversation between us during intimate and after had also been interesting. When he finished, he told me that he usually sleeps with anything that moves, but he never wanted to be with me again. 2 times was enough. I should lose his phone number. Fine, I said. My husband was way better in bed anyway. I was sure that hearing the dialogue between us might help Grant get over his hurt. As I watched his reaction, I couldn't tell. A few weeks later, Brenda was back and asked Grant again how he felt about me. For the first time since this had begun, he didn't answer in anger. He just said he didn't know. I was happier than I'd been since I left home. A few nights later, I almost had a heart attack. Grant was holding Brandy as usual while he and the girls watched TV. Brandy had been making the usual baby sounds, and she spit out her bottle and clearly said "Dada." Marie and Tara had smiled and laughed. Grant looked angry at first and glared at the baby. She looked straight at him and said it again, smiling, "Dada." Grant just shook his head and gave her the bottle back. Something else happened a few days after that. Grant asked Brenda to watch the girls for him one evening. She agreed but asked where he was going. He just told her he was going out. That bothered me because if he started dating, there was a good chance I'd lose him. In our state, I only had a few more months before Grant could divorce me for abandonment, so I couldn't take the chance that he'd start dating. That evening, Grant went out. I walked into a bar to get a drink. It wasn't an accident. I'd picked that particular place at that particular time for a reason. I'd done some checking and found out who this Denny was. He was a local scumbag. He wasn't exactly a criminal. He was just a lazy good-for-nothing who'd gotten lucky and married a rich older woman. His wife controlled everything in the relationship, but it still left Denny the time and money to screw anything that wasn't nailed down. This bar was where he liked to hang out. I came here seeking answers. He had a few friends that he liked to brag to about his exploits. He was already holding court when I sat down at the bar near his table. He was bragging about some dancer he'd supposedly been with. I joined the conversation as if I was one of his old friends. "Dude, you've moved up in the world," I said. "Denny, I've been out of town for about a year. I went to see you. You should check out the chicks I brought back with me." My use of his name really made him think that he knew me. "California women, huh?" he asked. "Maybe we should get together. I'm not sure you're up to it." I laughed. "Last time I was here, you were sneaking off with some chunky chick." "Oh, please," he said. "Those older married women are the real test. Screwing some young chick that's never been plowed is okay, but when you get a bigger, older married chick chasing you, then you know you're something." I nodded my head as if I almost believed him but needed some convincing. I leaned over and told him to meet me in the parking lot so we could talk. Of course, his friends wanted to come, but I told them that if he vouched for them after we met, then maybe we could bring them along next time. They even paid for my beer. Denny and I headed out to the parking lot with big smiles on our faces. I was smiling because of what was about to happen to him too. Let me set the scene for you. Denny is a pretty big guy, bigger than me in fact, but his wife had pretty much tamed him. He was like those toothless old tigers in the zoo. His wife wore his balls on a chain around her neck. He looked scared of guys who were smaller than him and more domesticated, but just like those tigers from the zoo, when you took them out into the wild, a lot of them refused to come out of the cage. We got into the parking lot, and I sat on the hood of Denny's M3. "Tell me what happened with the chunky chick from last year," I snapped. Denny enjoyed telling his little tales to his friends, so he launched right into it. "That chick was really into me," he began. "I had the feeling that I knew her from somewhere, like maybe we went to school together or something. It was like she already knew me and had always wanted herself a big piece of Denny." He laughed at his own joke and then noticed that I wasn't laughing. We must have gone at it for at least a couple of hours straight. She even came back for more, so she must have liked what she got. "So, are you still seeing her?" I asked. "Hell no," he snapped. "I just hit it and quit it. I try to be careful, especially with married ones. That stupid witch wanted to leave her husband for me. She actually begged me to marry her and have kids with her. That's one thing I'm proud of. I've probably screwed a couple of hundred women, but not one of them has ever been able to pin a crumb snatcher on me. Why the hell would I ever want one of those vile, nasty little critters?" He just sucked in a breath to say something else when I hit him. My first punch stunned him, and he staggered backward. "Why the foo?" he began as I hit him again. This time, my hand connected with something more solid, and blood erupted from his face. "You broke my nose," he screamed. "If you don't tell me the truth, I'm going to break your ass," I said. "What do you want to know?" he asked, spitting out blood. I smiled as he cowered away from me. He had no guts at all, but then it's pretty tough to have guts when someone else has your balls. At that moment, my hatred for Denny turned to pity. I also abandoned my original plan to tell his wife what he'd done. Having that information get out could only hurt my girls, Marie especially. We were all better off without any of this getting out. From his statement about vile little critters, I realized that Denny didn't know that Marie or Brandy even existed, let alone that he was their male hormones donor. It was better for all concerned if he never knew the truth. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. You never know what might make me beat your ass again. I'm not one of your little friends, so don't bother trying to make yourself look good. Just tell me the truth, okay? The truth is, he said, I was shocked when she came on to me. Half of the women around here don't fall for my bullshit anymore. My wife is so old that she doesn't care about having intimate very often, and when she does, it's like screwing a wrinkled up corpse. I use a lot of hookers, so when this woman came to me, I didn't care if she was a little chunky. She was pretty and had big tits. It was free intimate. Why the hell would I look a gift horse in the mouth? But the intimate was awful. She didn't even take her clothes off. She acted like she didn't want me to touch her, and she called me names after it was over. He looked at me to get my reaction. I was sure I'd never see her again, he said. But a few weeks later, she came after me again. I figured that maybe the first time was just bad timing where she was in a bad mood, but the second time was even worse. She didn't even move the whole time I was screwing her. She had this look on her face like she hated me. I swear I knew her from somewhere, I just couldn't put it together. The look on her face was so hateful that I told her it was going to be the last time we ever got together. I had the feeling that she just hated men in general or me in particular. She seemed like the kind of woman who'd cut your throat while you were asleep. He wiped the blood from his busted nose and looked at me. She really looked like she was ashamed of herself or wanted to cry both times as soon as we were done. I'm telling you, she had tears in her eyes. I'm sure she was married, though, because she kept bringing him up. That was pretty weird too. Most of the married women I screw never talk about their husbands. It's almost as if talking about them makes them feel even guiltier about having intimate with me. Maybe in their minds, if they don't talk about them, their husbands don't exist for a short time, and they don't have to feel guilty. But this witch, he noticed the way my expression changed when he called her that. Anyway, this lady kept bringing him up. She kept saying things like, "My husband does way better than you do." It was just creepy. I kept wondering if she was going to bring him next time and make me watch him so I'd know how to do it the right way. He shook his head. Then there was the fact that she wouldn't touch me at all, even when we were done. A lot of women want you to hold them or just talk to them afterward, you know, so they don't feel cheap and used. But this lady didn't want either. She just wanted me to get the hell out of Dodge. She even made some kind of joke that I didn't understand about coming and going. He looked to see if I'd laugh. I'd already heard it on the DVD, so there was no need for him to explain it. It made me think, he said. I mean, if she was so into her old man, why wasn't she him? Then it hit me. She probably cheated on him, and he found out and left her. She couldn't him, so she went out looking for guys like me. She needed someone to screw her, but she hated us at the same time because her going out and around on him is what caused her to lose Mr. Wonderful in the first place. Life is strange, and people are really complex. He looked at me as if he had just said something extremely profound. Get the hell out of my sight, Denny, I said. But what about the California babe? He began, catching himself. Mr. Wonderful, I said as I walked away. I had a lot to think about. I'd parked a couple of blocks away just in case there were problems. Denny was far more of a wimp than I'd ever expected. He didn't even try to hit me once. He never fought back. He just started spilling his guts. I felt bad about the whole thing. In fact, I felt like I probably could have just asked him away from his friends and gotten him to tell me what I wanted to know. Plan B would have been to show him the videos and make him come clean about it, but when he started talking about my girls like they were, what did he call them? Vile, nasty critters. He deserved a beating, even though he didn't know they existed. Denny was in a whole different plane of scum, but that was no reason for me to lose control and resort to violence. What if I had gotten caught? What would my girls do if I was in jail? Besides me, who loved them? Their Aunt Brenda was just not the motherly type. Their grandmother and grandfather loved them but were simply too old to take care of them. There was only me. Of course, Bonnie loved them too, but where was she? The talk with Denny had actually made me see things in a different light. This was so complicated. Everything in life isn't just black or white, there are a lot of shades of gray. The only women in my life right now were my daughters and Bonnie's daughter. The thrumming of my Camaro's engine only seemed to make me want to re-examine my situation more. There were a lot of issues at stake here. Some of them were silly. Did Bonnie actually betray me? Yes, she did. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was right about everything. She did betray me. Did her reasons make sense? Not really. We were doing fine. We might have started a family eventually, but she made choices that complicated things. On the other hand, neither of us was getting any younger, especially her. If we'd waited for eventually, it might never have come. As much as I didn't want to admit it, maybe the way she went about it was wrong, but there was a reason for what she did. I would have preferred if we had talked about it and gone with a medical procedure instead of her making decisions on her own. The rest of the issues were a lot more complicated. Did I think that Bonnie loved me? I was still very sure that she did. Do I still love Bonnie? As much as I want to say, no, I'm over her, I can't. She's been gone for nearly a year. Brandy is beginning to talk and trying to walk now. I haven't been out on one date and have no plans to, but every day and every night I wonder where she is. I'm sure she's moved on, but I sometimes wish there had been a way to work things out. More than anything, I tell myself that I wish none of this had happened, but if I have to be honest, I'm not sure that's true anymore. If none of this had happened, I wouldn't have Brandy, and there's no use pretending that I don't love that little girl. I love her as much as I do the other two. She might not be my biological child, but she's definitely my child in every way that matters. I'm at least as much, if not more, her father than Denny. He wasn't the one she looked at and called Dada. That was me, and if I have my way, it always will be. Meanwhile, Bonnie was still at the convent. My time there had taught me a lot of things I never expected to learn. Before I'd been there a week, I'd been approached about buying some items for some of the nuns. Apparently, modern life had reached the convent as well. During my time here, women who needed things like that would never have even thought about joining the service of the Lord. Apparently, some of the church's rules had become more relaxed as well. A few months ago, I'd gone into the storage room on my floor and discovered two of the workers who were supposed to be rebuilding the wall on the north side of the complex. My shock at seeing them in the house when no men were supposed to be there was secondary to my shock at what they were doing. I quickly closed the door and went about my business. A few days later, I ran into one of the workers, and he made an inappropriate suggestion in exchange for my silence. He assumed that, since I'd been married, I might miss some aspects of married life. I refused him. I did actually miss it, and I missed it every day. But I didn't miss just anyone, I missed having my husband with me. Despite the circumstances that brought me back here, I was still committed to my husband. I missed Grant with every fiber of my being, so there was no way I'd compromise the memory of what we had just for something fleeting. I cried myself to sleep again that night. I couldn't even bear to think about my family. More and more, I was beginning to realize that Grant was probably never going to forgive me for what I'd done. It was enough for me that he, at least on the surface, had accepted my daughter. Maybe he didn't claim her, but it was obvious even to me, who only watched them on video, that he cared for her. I awoke the next morning to the sound of my cell phone ringing. It rang 4 times and then stopped before the voicemail would pick it up. Then it rang 4 times again. Someone wanted to talk to me badly. I picked up the phone and answered sleepily. "Hello?" "Bonnie, get home now," said my sister Brenda. "Why?" I asked. "Grant went out last night," she said. "It won't work," I said. "If he's dating now, it's even more reason to stay away. He's probably moving on." "No, silly," she snapped. "Can I tell you what I think happened before you jump to some silly conclusion? You already made one poor decision that nearly messed up your life. Are you ready to listen this time?" I really didn't like the way she was talking to me, but Brenda had never been a people person. Maybe that's why she was a model. She had no human feelings and was really just a mannequin to hang clothes on. "Go ahead," I said. "For the first time since you left, Grant wanted to go out last night. We've tried to get him to go out many times, but he never would. At first, I was a bit jealous, she said. I always figured that if the two of you never got back together, maybe I'd give Grant a shot. He really is a good guy. I couldn't believe my own sister would say that. I got a bit upset but tried not to let it show. Anyway, he went out, she continued, and his big date only lasted for about 45 minutes. Well, maybe being a first date, they just weren't compatible, I said. But if he started dating, sooner or later he'll find someone. There aren't many women who wouldn't appreciate him. Can I finish the story? Asked Brenda. Sorry, I said. When he came home, I noticed that his hands were a bit bruised, not badly, but it looked like he'd been in a fight, she said. My sudden intake of air caused her to laugh. You do still care about him, she said, laughing. Of course I do, I snapped. This whole thing was never about whether or not I care for him. I love Grant, and I always will until there's nothing left of anything anywhere, and probably even after that. Get on with the story. So I asked him about it, Brenda said, and he said that he fell. He really isn't a good liar, is he? Who puts their knuckles down to catch themselves if they fall? But he didn't want to talk about it, so I didn't push. This morning, a friend of mine told me that your old friend Denny had been injured pretty badly. His lip was swollen and his nose was broken. I went over to the house again early this morning so the girls could make me breakfast. I'm their only female role model since their mother left. What choice did I have? Brenda, I said, beginning to cry. Anyway, we sat down at the table. Marie said grace, as she always does, and Grant mentioned your name at the end. Marie kind of sneered. Tara just thought about it. After breakfast, I asked Grant why he'd done it, and he told me that he'd been thinking about you a lot lately. So I asked him if that was why he'd started dating. He just smiled and told me that he didn't think he would ever really look for anyone to replace you. He just wasn't interested. I asked him if he still loved you. For the first time since you've been gone, he wasn't angry. He just said that he loved you with all of his heart, and the thing he regrets most about all of this is that he never talked to you about it before you left. But he hopes that you're happy wherever you are and with whoever you're with. But he didn't drive me away, I said, trying to keep my emotions steady. And I'm not with anyone but him. So shouldn't you head home and tell him that? My sister asked, her tone insistent. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my purse and keys, ran out to my car, and clutched my phone. I didn't even bother to change out of my nightgown. Surprisingly, none of the men I encountered at gas stations along the way seemed to notice or say anything. It was the women and girls who pointed and chuckled at my attire. My phone rang again. I glanced at the screen and saw Brenda's name. I answered. Well, did you think about what I said? She asked sharply. I'm seriously considering it, I replied. Good, she said. You may have your moments, but you're still a great sister, and I think you and Grant need each other. And despite everything, you're still my sister, even if you do have a strange way of showing affection, I said, then hung up and focused on driving. Meanwhile, Grant was with the girls. We were running late getting home that evening after a long day of running errands. I decided we deserved a treat, so we stopped at McDonald's for dinner. I thought we'd sit together in front of the TV, relax, and bond over the food. But as soon as Marie got into the car and hugged me, she brought up her mother again. Why did you have to mention her? Dad, she left us. We don't need her, Marie said, frustration in her voice. Marie, there's a difference between love and need, I explained. I understand why you're confused. You're going through what I went through. I was hurt, too. I'm not sure why she did what she did, but I think she felt trapped and needed space to figure things out. No, Dad, Marie interrupted. She just bailed. She left you, me, Tara, and even Brandy. She's the one who didn't live up to her responsibilities. Tara, who had just climbed into the car, nodded in agreement. We talked about it the whole way to the daycare center to pick up Brandy, and even during the drive to McDonald's. But soon, other topics took over, like Tara's insistence that she needed a phone now that she was 10. "Tara, you're only 10, Marie said. Dad isn't going to buy you an iPhone. You're still just a kid." "I am not," Tara protested. "Phones are given to kids earlier now. When Brandy starts school, she'll probably have one too." The conversation continued until we got home. We walked inside, and Tara was so focused on her argument that she didn't notice when Marie, holding the bags of food, suddenly froze. Tara turned to see why, and there stood Bonnie, coming out of the bedroom. Brandy, who had been holding my hand and practicing her steps, immediately reached out to me when she saw her mom. Bonnie's hands reached toward her, but Brandy cried and clung to me instead. Bonnie stepped back, visibly hurt. "Why are you here? Did you forget something?" Marie asked sharply. Bonnie took a deep breath. "I missed you girls, and I missed your dad. Someone told me that maybe he wasn't as angry with me as I thought." "You should have stayed away," Marie muttered, walking off in frustration. "So, do I get my iPhone?" Tara asked, seemingly unaffected by the tension. I sighed, picked up the bags of food, and took them to the girls' room. They settled in to watch a movie while they ate, and I promised Marie we'd talk more later. I then went back to the living room, holding Brandy as she began to get sleepy. It was around the time I usually walked her around, gently talking to her as she drifted off. Bonnie sat on the couch, watching me. "Wow, you've made yourself at home," I said, trying to sound casual. Her face lit up with a smile. I rushed out as soon as my sister told me we needed to talk. "I didn't even change my clothes," she admitted, glancing down at her outfit. "There's no one I need to call. Right now, there's nothing more important than this." She paused for a moment, still watching me. "There's no one else in my life, Grant," she added softly, as if reassuring both of us. "Because I've missed you so much," she said. "And because I've watched you care for Brandy every night for the past 11 months. You're the best father I could imagine." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Grant, she's your baby, not Denny's," she said, her frustration growing. "Brandy is bonded to you. You're her dad. You're the one she looks to. I remember the first time she called you that," she added. "No, you weren't here for that," I said. "Yes, I was," she insisted, moving toward the bookshelf and picking up a small object. "I kept these around the house. I might not have been here in person, but I was never far away." "So, you were watching us?" I asked. "Call it what you want," she replied. "I just couldn't live without knowing how you and the girls were doing. What if something had happened, and you needed me? I had to be sure you were all okay. And you've done such an incredible job with the girls, better than I ever could have imagined." She stood up and walked toward me slowly. "You could tell me to leave, but you need to understand something. I was wrong. I made a mistake, and it took me a long time to see it. All I wanted was to be with you and our family, but I went about it the wrong way. I just kept thinking of how it would feel to have you and our baby together. It became the only thing on my mind, and in trying to make it happen, I lost sight of everything else." She stopped right next to me, as Brandy slept on my shoulder. "What I did was terrible," she said quietly. "I deceived you. I lied to you. But I want to make things right. I want to be with our family again. I know I'll have to earn back your trust and love, but I'm willing to try if you give me a chance." "So now we know why you're here," I said. "Why do you think I'm here?" "I thought you came to get your baby," she said. "We talked about divorce and custody, but I never wanted to lose all of you. If I had offered to put Brandy up for adoption back then, would you have taken me back?" she asked. "I always believed a child should be with their mother," I said. "But when you left, I thought it was best if you and she moved on, and I'd take care of the girls. Or we'd arrange custody, and I'd visit as often as I could. What if I offered to take her now?" she asked. "I'd say no," I responded firmly. "You abandoned her." She sighed deeply. "Grant, I was just making conversation. I would never dream of taking her from you. That's not why I came back. Then why did you come back? I asked. I came back for you, she said softly. I miss you. I miss our family. I want to make things right. I love you, and I can't imagine life without you. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. You lived without us for almost a year. Why come back now? I asked. I realized how much I missed everything. I just want our life back, she said. I stood up and took her hand, guiding her outside. She followed me, but her expression turned to sadness as we stood by the door. Bonnie, I live a simple life, I said. Let me remind you of what happened in simple terms. You made a decision that hurt everyone involved. You wanted something for yourself, and you acted on that, leaving behind the people who depended on you. Now you come back asking for another chance? I can't do that. I need to think of what's best for our daughters, and I'm not sure you're the best example for them. Tears filled Bonnie's eyes. But you love me and the girls. Don't push me away, she pleaded. Just then, a man approached. Excuse me, he said. I'm looking for Mrs. Bonnie Henderson. I pointed to Bonnie. That's her. The man handed her an envelope. You've been served, he said before walking away. Any further discussion will be through my attorney, I said calmly. I've filed for divorce, and I intend to keep custody of the girls. You'll have limited visitation rights. If you contest the divorce, I'll take legal action for everything you've done. No, please don't do this, she begged. I just wanted you to be happy. By then, my daughters had appeared, and Tara spoke up. It's time for you to leave, Mom. We have homework to finish. They returned to their rooms. Goodbye, Bonnie, I said quietly. Bonnie stood there for a moment, tears in her eyes, before turning and leaving. She never contested the divorce. The judge granted it in my favor since there was no opposition. I still live with my daughters and enjoy our life together. As for Bonnie, I'm not sure what became of her. Dear listeners, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.